I'm honored to be here. Amal started us off talking about this midway assessment of the decade of healthy aging. And I think that's such a great idea. I think we often have these decades of, and we know when they start, and then about 20 years after they're over, we say, oh yeah, remember that was? So sort of taking stock of where we are is a terrific idea, and that got me thinking about taking stock of where we are in terms of research, what we know, where we've been wrong, and where we need to go from here. And so I want to go back to this population aging idea and put that in a slightly different perspective. We've talked about population pyramids, and you all know what they are. What I want to point out is that just as recently as 1950 in the United States, we had a pyramid-shaped population, distribution of age in the population. And it wasn't just the United States, it was every country on the planet. And in fact, we can look at this in historical perspective too. We've had population pyramid-shaped age distributions since we've had humans. So we've always had many more young people than old people. And then in a century, we reshaped the population pyramids into rectangles. And we're calling this population aging, but I think if you look at this for just a second, we see it's not so much population aging. Yes, the median age is going up in the population, but it's really population or age diversification. And if we think of this as age diversification, I think we have different discussions, we see different problems, we see different potential solutions. So I think it's important to point this out. And we're not in the United States top-heavy with old people. We have the same number of 5-year-olds and 65-year-olds. There are countries that are now top-heavy with older people, but by mid-century, the expectation is we'll rectangularize every population. Fewer births, longer lives, that's what we see. And think about that for a second. Again, this is almost a religious experience. It's like, oh my gosh, look what we did, what we created, we humans, through culture. Fertility is also something we've talked about, mostly in terms of whether we think a population is old or young. Fertility has major effects beyond the influence on how fast and how the degree to which a population is aging. I don't have to say to this room, it has a lot to do with who is going to pay for programs premised on age pyramid-shaped populations. But there's a whole lot that these low rates of fertility are going to affect. It has implications for the family. For example, we're going to have 4 and 5 generations routinely alive at the same time. And to put that in perspective, today, a 20-year-old male has a better chance of having a living grandmother than a 20-year-old male in 1900 had of having a living mother. That's what's changed. This is a huge change, and it will have major implications for the way that we live our lives. Fertility reductions and longer lives are also leading to mixed-aged workforces. So we currently have 6, many of you do, no doubt, 6 birth cohorts in the workforce at the same time. That looks pretty good, but we really do need more research to understand how we can best optimize workforces that have such a wide range of age. In the United States, by 2040, according to CBO, the only increase in population size will be through immigration in the United States. And this projection was made actually before the election, so who knows what immigration will do. But the point is that in the United States, without immigration, we would be aging in the way that Germany and many Asian countries are aging. Fertility in some parts of the world, let's say Korea, Mike, I'm going to turn to you and ask you to do this real quick. No, you don't have to do it. You don't actually have to do this, but he can tell you when fertility is 0.75, replacement rate is 2.1. When fertility goes to 0.75, it does not take many generations before that population size is so strikingly reduced, it's a whole different real population. And then think about caregiving for a minute. Yesterday we had this great session on caregiving. And even the researchers, when they're thinking about who the participants should be in these studies, go to family members, the adult children who have older parents. That's who we think of as the caregivers. And ARP can tell us that is who the caregivers are. Family caregiving is the basis of our care system in this country. And when you have a fertility rate in the US, it's 1.6, that is no longer feasible. 20% of women today in the United States are not having children, and surveys of women under 40 make it look like they're not going to have children, and that percentage is going to get closer to 30%. The model of caregiving, where there's a family member, a younger family member who's going to take care of you, is simply untenable. There are other changes in the future population, and when we think about planning and research on what we need to know, of course we need to think about who the population is and make sure we're not studying the population we have now or had in the past. Old people, largely white in this country, that's not going to be the case in the future. We're going to have much more ethnically diverse populations of older adults. It looks like people will be living in mega cities, which probably will be very good for caregiving, since we're going to need other people than family around to help us. But we need to take those things into consideration as we're thinking about planning and research in the future. So let me quickly talk about a few areas that I think we've gone wrong, and what we need to know, what we're finding out, and then what we still need to know. So I made this slide a few years ago just to sum up research on aging, and I'm actually quite serious that this is the hypothesis that guides most research on aging, and it is the assumption we have when we're talking about older populations. No. Finally, an economist recognizes my contributions. The great news is this is not true. It's not even true in terms of financial prowess, financial ability. Eric Johnson did a study where he compared older people who are doing their own finance and investing through their lives to young people. And this is not a surprise, right? I mean, in a way this seems obvious, but older people do better. They outperform younger people. Experience matters. Mental health. People assume old people are lonely, they're depressed, they're anxious. My research group has been studying emotion for years, and it's the opposite of this. Older people are doing better in terms of mental health than middle-aged and younger people. They're less lonely. They have fewer negative emotions, more pro-social, more likely to forgive. There are just all sorts of ways that older people seem to be doing better psychologically in terms of emotional, social health than younger people. And here's a problem with averages. And again, this is the average, and we usually are looking at averages when we talk about older populations. Some more good news for you. Here are very recent findings. They haven't been published, but I have permission from Anthony Wagner, who has been working on these, along, by the way, with a postdoc, Subu S., funded by the Bank of America, so thank you very much, who's working with him on this project. What he's done is to deeply characterize with spinal taps, genetic testing, every kind of blood test you can imagine, and we can now do this and have a very good sense of whether somebody has a healthy brain or not. People are enrolled in the study, and then they're followed over time, very detailed analyses of how well they're performing cognitively. What I want you to note is how there are a lot of straight lines there, where we're seeing no decline across close to 8 years. This is an important story because we're also seeing some steep drop-offs there. That's dementia. And there are two things that are really good news here. One is we can now identify dementia very early before there are symptoms. That's going to help when people are thinking about, for example, annuities or other kinds of financial products. Also, the better news for people in this room especially is that most of us aren't going to show cognitive decline. Now, we've been saying dementia rates are going down. They've been going down for some time, and that's great news. Since the 1970s, they've been going down. John, you mentioned yesterday, if you go back to 1970, many people had dropped out of high school. Many Americans didn't even have that. It looks like those cohort effects are resulting in a reduction in cohort incidence of dementia. And so we're already seeing some good news there. But this is really good news for us, and it suggests that we can't assume that most old people we're talking to, in fact, the opposite of that, most old people we're talking to are going to be doing fine cognitively. You may have read the really good news about the shingles vaccine. Shingrix vaccines appear to lower dementia risk by 20%. Amazing. They're awful, bad side effects, get them. better than dementia. So what else do we need to know? Well, we need to know how to keep humans healthy. I think of myself, by the way, as an optimist, but wow, this article, if you read this, and it's in The Economist, this essay is by an author who is arguing that we can't leave it to those biohacks to think about longer lives. They're doing such great work that we need governments to now take over and regulate what's going to happen as people live longer. This is really more optimistic even than me. What do we need to know? One major thing we need to know is how long we can live. And David McCarthy's paper yesterday was really informative and exciting to me, as we're beginning to see that what's happening is not an increase in lifespan by any means, which is what people have been thinking and suspecting for a long time. But the reason we're seeing some numbers change is because of mortality compression. That's the kind of thing we really do need to know. And Steve and Olivia's paper on the importance of, underscores, I should say, the importance of aligning health span to lifespan. Those of you who are religious know about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. We can also talk about the 4 horsemen of death or threat of disease. And those are cardiovascular disease, cancer, neurodegenerative disease, and metabolic disease. Those are all chronic diseases rooted in lifestyle that are conceivably targets of behavioral change that could greatly improve life. We're seeing lots of technological and basic bio advances in understanding health. This is a slide of a tattoo developed by a materials scientist, a chemist at Stanford, where you can monitor not only everything your watch is monitoring, but glucose, heart rate, skin temperature, and this is the way we'll be monitoring our health in the future. It'll hook through Bluetooth to your phones and devices, and you could imagine going into the bathroom in the morning, and on the mirror, it's listing the kinds of things that have just changed in the last week. This kind of thing is going to be really helpful for us to have more precision health. We'll be able to design what we need to do to stay healthier longer. There's an engineer, a bioengineer at Stanford, who's making this brace. It's going to get prettier because the material scientists will find ways to make it smaller and thinner, but wearing this will give you the sense that you just took a 20-pound backpack off your back and increases walking speed by 9%. Imagine what that does to people suffering from sarcopenia, this kind of normal, what we think of as normal, typical muscle wasting that we see with age. These kinds of technologies are not just right around the corner, they're here, they're walking around campus. Those are the kinds of things we need to think of as ways to improve health, and that will also have major implications for quality of life, our ability to work, our ability to get around. Tony Weiss-Corey and his colleagues have found ways now not just to tell you what your biological age is, which has been around for a while, but what each of your organs' ages are. Again, I think of this as having big implications for health. The one I keep thinking of is like liver health. So if you like to drink a lot and somebody tells you, you know, your liver's 80 even though you're 60, you might want to think about cutting back. And this is something you're going to hear before you hear that you have cirrhosis, where you can't do anything about it. So to the extent that we can find these out early, I think it can be really useful for people, giving us insights into our health along the way. And then, of course, there are the GLP-1 agonists, Wegovy. People are now using Wegovy not just for weight loss, but microdosing, because the side effects appear pretty remarkable, like lowering cholesterol, reducing risk for dementia, reducing risk of cardiovascular disease. This could be the drug. This could be the new metformin. We need a lot more research on it to find out if that is the case. But that's pretty exciting to think about these kinds of things that are coming onto the market that are going to help us stay healthier longer. And then we need to find ways to be financially secure throughout our long and now healthier lives. In my view, we've done pretty well in the last 50 years in helping people accumulate assets and savings and just beginning to do better on decumulation. And so decumulation is something that we need to think about more. This last session was fantastic, and ways to think about that. Again, I was kind of weaving together these findings about dementia and early detection of dementia and annuitization, and I just think that's really going to help people do better. We need more products than annuities. With full transparency, I'm on the board of a company called LifeX. It's a bond ladder that people can buy for a fixed number of years, where you get to keep, you can cancel it at any point along the way, and you can make that just for 10 years or just for 20 years, or you could gift it to an adult child who just had children as a way of giving bequests earlier in life as opposed to in the traditional way. We really need to design a new map of life. We need to think differently about these 30 extra years that our ancestors handed us, no strings attached. And what we did reflexively was to tack them on all at the end. Only old age got longer, and we're complaining about it. We can put these years anywhere we want. We're not going to be able to do it unless we have financial products that help people live differently. I've been telling people we should have a new approach to work where we retire early and often. To do that, we need to go back to school, we need to retrain. There are a lot of different ways we need to think about saving. But here's the opportunity, and no cohorts, no generations of humans have ever had this opportunity, and that is to rethink that three-stage model of life, where in early life you learn, you get an education, middle of life you work, have kids, and finally, if you're lucky enough to survive to retirement age, you get a little bit of a break, leisure. We don't have to live that way. We can weave together leisure, work, education throughout all of our lives. We will need this group in this room in order to achieve that. Thank you.